This is the story of Rapunzel. Once upon a time, in a town near a dense forest in Europe, there lived a barren couple. For many years, the man and his wife had lived unhappily and had all but given up hope that one day they would have a baby of their own. Now, these good people had a little window at the back of their house which looked into a neighboring garden, filled with all manner of beautiful flowers and vegetables. This lovely garden was surrounded by a high wall, and no one dared to enter it, for it belonged to a witch of great power who was feared by all who lived in the town. One day, the wife felt her stomach swell and knew at once that they were soon to be blessed with a child. As she stood at the window overlooking the garden, she noticed for the first time a bed full of the finest lettuce. The leaves looked so fresh and green that she longed to eat them. Her desire grew day by day, and just because she knew she couldn't possibly get any, she pined away at the thought until she became quite pale and wretched. Her husband grew alarmed and asked,
"What ails you, dear wife?"
"Oh, my love," she answered,
"For many days now I have longed to taste the lettuce that grows in the garden next door. I fear that if I don't have any, I will surely die."
After trying to reason with her, the husband, who loved her dearly, knew what he had to do. So he waited until dusk and climbed over the wall into the witch's garden. Hastily, he gathered a handful of lettuce leaves and returned with them to his wife. She then made them into a salad which tasted so good that her longing for the forbidden food was greater than ever. If she were to know any peace of mind, there was nothing for it but that her husband should climb over the garden wall again and fetch her some more. So, at dusk, over he got, but when he reached the other side, he drew back in terror, for there, standing before him, was the old witch.
"How dare you climb into my garden and steal my lettuce like a common thief?"
she said, with a wrathful glance.
"You shall suffer for this."
"Pardon my presumption,"
he implored,
"but necessity alone drove me to the deed. You see, my wife saw your lettuce from her window and conceived such a desire for it that she felt certain she would die had it not been gratified."
Then the witch's anger was a little appeased, and she said,
"If it's as you say, you may take as much lettuce away with you as you like, but on one condition. You give me the child your wife will bring into the world. I will then look after it like a mother."
The man, in his terror, agreed to everything she asked, and lo and behold, when the wife gave birth, the witch appeared and snatched the baby away from the parents. And having given the baby the name of Rapunzel, she carried it off with her. Now Rapunzel was the most gentle, beautiful child under the sun. But when she was just 12 years old, the witch, worried that anyone would see her beauty, hid her away in a tall tower in the middle of a great wood. The tower had neither stairs nor doors, and the only way for Rapunzel to see the outside world was through her window at the very top of the tower. Every day, when the old witch paid Rapunzel a visit, she would stand below the tower and call out,
"Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your golden hair."
And Rapunzel, letting down her wonderful long hair, allowed the witch to climb up. After many years, it happened one day that a prince was riding through the wood and passed by the tower. As he drew near it, he heard someone singing so sweetly that he stood still, utterly spellbound by the voice. It was Rapunzel, in her loneliness, trying to while away the time by letting her sweet voice ring out into the wood. The prince was enchanted and longed to see the owner of the voice. However, he sought in vain for a door of the tower. By nightfall, he decided to ride home, but was so haunted by the maiden's song that he returned every day to the wood and listened. One day, as he was standing thus behind a tree, listening to the sweet voice of Rapunzel, he saw the old witch hobble to a clearing by the tower and heard her call out,
"Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your golden hair."
Then Rapunzel let down her hair, and the witch climbed up.
"So that's the staircase,"
said the prince.
"Then I too will climb it and try my luck."
So on the following day at dusk, he went to the foot of the tower and cried out,
"Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your golden hair."
And as soon as she had let it down, the prince climbed up. At first, upon seeing an unfamiliar man in her room, Rapunzel was terribly frightened. In fact, in all her life, she had never seen one before. But the prince, trying not to startle Rapunzel, spoke to her so kindly and told her at once that his heart had been so touched by her singing that he felt he should know no peace of mind till he had seen her. Very soon Rapunzel forgot her fear, and when he asked her to marry him, she consented at once. She thought to herself,
"I'll certainly be happier with him than with the old witch."
So she put her hand in his and said,
"If I can find a way out of this tower, I will gladly go with you."
At length they worked out a plan. Each time the prince would visit his beloved, he would bring with him a skein of silk, which she would use to make a ladder. Once this ladder was long enough, Rapunzel would use it to climb down the tower, and then they would both escape on horseback. So, every evening, once the old witch had left the tower, the prince would return and bring with him the silk, until at last the ladder was ready. The old witch, of course, knew nothing of what was going on, till one day Rapunzel, not thinking of what she was doing, turned to the witch and said,
"How is it, good mother, that you are so much harder to pull up than the young prince?"
"What did you say?" "Oh, you wicked child,"
cried the witch.
"I have given you everything you've ever wanted, and now, in spite of my love, you have managed to deceive me."
In her wrath, she seized Rapunzel's beautiful hair, wound it round and round her left hand, and then, grasping a pair of scissors in her right, snipped it off, and at once Rapunzel's beautiful golden braids lay on the ground. She then took the poor girl to a lonely corner of the desert, and there left her to live in loneliness and misery. Later that evening, after the poor Rapunzel had been driven away, the witch fastened the braids onto a hook in the window, and when the prince came and called for Rapunzel, the old witch let them down. As usual, the prince climbed up, but instead of his beloved Rapunzel, he found the old witch, who fixed her evil, glittering eyes upon him and cried mockingly,
"My dear fool of a prince, you thought you could find your lady love, but Rapunzel is lost to you forever, and you will see her no more."
The prince was beside himself with grief, and in his despair he jumped out of the window, and though he escaped with his life, the thorns among which he fell pierced out his eyes. The blind, wretched prince then wandered through the wood, eating nothing but roots and berries, weeping and lamenting the loss of his lovely bride. This was the case for many years, when at last he came to the corner of the desert where Rapunzel was living. All of a sudden, he heard a song which seemed strangely familiar to him. He walked eagerly in the direction of the sound, and when he was quite close, Rapunzel, recognizing her dear prince, ran towards him and held him in her arms. When she realized that he had lost his sight, she began to weep, but as 2 of her tears fell into each of his eyes, his sight, as though by magic, became quite clear again. And the prince now saw as well as he had ever done. The couple then embraced and vowed to never leave one another again. The prince then led Rapunzel to his kingdom, where they were received by his subjects and welcomed with great joy. And, sure enough, they lived happily until the end of their days. The end.